for episode of The Alignment. Today is all about sign-up flows. They are an area of intense scrutiny for every product manager and for our colleagues in marketing, because like it or not, they are one of the most essential parts of our product. I'm so excited for our conversation today. If this is your first time at The Alignment, first of all, welcome. We are global app testing. We run these episodes. We help some of the biggest technology companies in the world to understand their global experiences better and therefore to improve their sign-up completion rates. We do this via a technology called crowd testing, where we would match you with a tester worldwide in the same way that Uber might match you with a driver. So that's going to give you extra visibility on any of your software flows, particularly those which are difficult to test, which maybe involve moving cash or which are global. So that is us. If you would like to hear more, we're going to send you a thank you email for attending. So please do just respond to that. The Alignment is our, sorry, we'll come back to that. This is our, if you'd like a primer on specifically how GAT helps, we'll include that as well. And we will add a link to the chat shortly. The Alignment is our webinar series. It is all about global software products. The way that it works is that each of our panelists here today are going to spend 5 minutes talking about a conceit related to the main topic of the episode, all about sign-up flows. When they are done, about halfway through, they're going to pivot into being a panel and they are going to answer your questions. So if you have questions, you are highly encouraged to ask them. You can do that via the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I think that Zoom keeps moving about its UX, but right now for me, they're under the ... more section. So you can dive right in there and you can ask our panelists anything you like. They're not obliged to answer, but they are here and they're highly encouraged to. So looking forward to getting some of your questions there. Finally, our panelists today, we've got an amazing panel here in the room with us. The first speaker today is Shreyas Desmukh. He is the lead product manager at the Warner Music Group, and he is going to be telling us all about some of what he learned working for big tech about signups. Marikayan Matsek, the director of product expansion at Verif, that is AI-powered ID authentication. He's going to be talking about the trade-off between conversion rate, risk, and cost mitigation. Next, we're going to have Betty Casagrande, the lead PM consultant at Product People, which is a fractional product management agency resource. She is going to be talking a little bit about managing sign-up flows in very regulated products. Saba Quasi, the senior product manager at Yelp, will be talking about optimizing the onboarding process for consumer growth. And then last but not least, we have Sayan Meiti, the director of product marketplace and the driver app at FreeNow, the mobility super app. And he is going to be giving us a case study all about making a login mandatory. So you can hear there the competing themes of sign-up flows, a desire for user growth, compliance obligations, security risk, data capture. It's all there. I'm so excited to get started. So without much further ado, I am going to hand straight over to Shreyas, where we'll hear about sign-up secrets, what big tech knows that you don't. Over to you, Shreyas.
Thank you so much, Adam. And hey, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us on a nice December evening. So my name is Shreyas. I've spent most of my career in big tech, primarily Google, where I was for like the last 5 years, and Microsoft before that. I've like dabbled with startups here and there. So few things which I've learned, right? Like something which we all know as product managers is users are very important people, right? That's just obvious. But why do I want to emphasize on that? Here, the acronym VIP, very important people. Just be with me for the next 5 minutes as I break that down for you. So the first thing, which is, let's begin with that V, right? So value first and sign up later. I think it so happens all the time that we're never thinking about like, okay, what is the value that we are actually providing to this user? And we're just thinking about like, oh, in our little swim lane, okay, what is the sign up flow and whatnot, right? This is something which we did when I was still at Google with Google AdSense. That's the product I used to manage. We had a little calculator on the AdSense website. So when you go there, you basically can see, okay, if I have my blog, which is in travel, primarily in the US, how much money can I generate by just putting ads in this? And that was a really good thing for people who were on the fence of like, oh, should I do this financially? Will it make sense or not to have ads on my site? Just gave them something more tangible. It gave them a value. And they could like finally come back and say, okay, fine, I want to do this, right? And even if users who were like, okay, I don't want to do this, you know that they were not going to stick around anyway. So the churn, which you would have seen later, is already off, right? So that's the value first and sign up later. That's my first one. So on the I from the VIP, the I is really more about integrate accounts across apps and services if you have them. And as I said, because I spent most of my time in big tech, Google, Microsoft, both of them had multiple products, right? And I think this should be more like a rule, or like this should basically be a rule, to be honest with you. Now, I spent time with Microsoft while I was managing Office apps, and it's like almost a decade ago. But even back then, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Outlook, you name it, right? If you signed up once on any of these apps, will basically take your credentials and make sure you have a smooth experience when you move to the next one, right? So whether you're already signed up for Office as Word, and like now you're opening your first spreadsheet on a mobile app, you'll be absolutely fine. What that helped was, of course, like the users could just jump straight into the experience, but also as like product people, we knew a lot more about them. We could actually provide and like cater to a better experience. Again, something which I did at Google, Google Podcast was a product which came around when I was still managing that. And you knew people's search history, you knew their Google account, their Gmail, all of that. So you could like basically even tell them like, hey, maybe these are a few podcasts that you want to listen to, right? So that's where you provide, again, the value kind of thing again comes in. But then that's where you need to integrate across your apps and services if you have a suite of products, of course, and then like look at sign up together. So that's my I from the VIP. And then lastly, the P, think about progress and not really process. So it so happens all the times, like we always looking at our swim lanes. Like I'm the PM for sign up conversion flow, I'm looking at churn and all that. But I mean, your user who's coming to your product, essentially trying to complete a goal, right? They're looking at that objective. They have a job to be done, so to speak, and that's what matters to them. So, I mean, the more you align with them from a perspective of like, okay, how is this sign up going to be a part or like completing your progress eventually, the better it is. So, as an example, say you have something like a mortgage product, right? So, can you talk about like, okay, just 70% there, or just one more step before we give you an agreement in principle? I think that's where you kind of like also give them a cookie in terms of like, okay, you're almost there, and we just need this to give you the final value to complete the progress which you have made, right? So just to like wrap that up, so that's the VIP for you. Value first, sign up later. That's the way. Integrate accounts across apps, only applicable if you have a suite of products. And then finally, progress over process, right? Like, so think about users' progress and not really process. Anyway, so that's my time. I'll hand it over to Markian.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Markian. Happy to be here. And I've been in tech for about 13 years, and I've been in startups. I've had my own startup. I've spent a lot of time at Vimeo optimizing the onboarding journey of the users. And like Shreyas mentioned, focusing quite a lot on getting the value first. I've competed with Loom, which was a fun experience. And definitely there's a lot of fun onboarding challenges there. But I'm now at Verif. It's an IDV company, identity verification, which essentially gives a gives a way to make sure that you can tell that the person is who they say they are. And through my journey in Verif, I realized that while I've spent so much focus on making sure I give value to the users and I onboard them and I convert as many users as I can, there are also a lot of users out on the internet who you don't want to onboard, who you want to close the gates to. A good example, we can take some company like Lyft, for example, driving mobility. I think you'll hear more on this topic later today. If you think about it from a PM perspective, when a user signs up to take a ride, it's pretty straightforward. You just want them to get a ride as fast as possible. Classic onboarding one-on-one. But then if you would use a different product from Lyft, like car rental, now you're running a risk of losing like $50,000 if this user has bad intentions. So you probably don't want to just give them value fast. You want to balance that with mitigating that risk. Otherwise, you'd be out of business. So for those cases, for example, you would do something. You would use something like Verif. You would ask them to take a selfie, scan their document number, make sure it's not fraudulent. They are who they say they are. So you can find them and essentially like make sure they don't steal your car. But that hits conversion quite a lot. And obviously you'll lose a lot of users when you ask something like that. And you lose some of the bad users, which you want, but you also lose some of the good users, which you don't want. And in between these two extremes, there lies a lot of interesting ways to manage that risk between just onboarding users without asking them any questions, maybe even without a sign up, and getting them through IDV, through selfie and passport check. And I think there's a lot of interesting room in between there. So for example, one of the tactics that I like, and also building on Shreya's team, like what you can use, the information you can use behind the scenes to optimize experience. It's a pure risk management. For example, just from their email address, you can look up the age of that email, and you can look up whether they have social media accounts. That already gives you an idea if this is a user with an email they've confirmed through a reliable way, and this email has been alive for a couple of years, there's a bigger likelihood that this is a legit person. They're a little less likely to steal your car. If the account, the age of this email account was a couple days, couple minutes, this is a definite risk signal for you. You definitely want to put more measures to it. And even with a car, I would say you probably don't want to just lend them a car based on the age of their email account. If it's something like a scooter, it's a lower risk. You would lose, I don't know, a couple $100 maybe. Maybe then it's worth it. Unit economics might allow it. But then you could use more signals. You could look at their device ID. Like, was this device ever used before for some fishy activities? Maybe you can see with some partners like Verif or others, you can see if they've passed some successful checks before and they use other services. This creates more trust for them. And it's important to call out, like in this case, you don't need to ask user to do much. Like you just sign up, they just sign up with email, and you're already getting so many other different signals. Then there's a lot of very helpful sources of truth, reliable sources, government databases sometimes that can tell you there's a person with this name and this date of birth. Do they exist? Are they registered somewhere? That gives you more confidence that this is a real person. And then balancing these different tools and methods of passive information behind the scenes and asking user for more information, you can optimize your conversion score against your risk of getting fraudulent users. And often it overlaps with compliance as well, although that adds another layer. But I found this journey quite fascinating, balancing those two things, and I'm happy to talk more about it. And I'm passing it on to, is it Betty?
Thanks, Markian. Hi, everyone. I'm Betty from Product People. I've been around the block for a few years and supported over 12 companies building products as a product manager. And I work in various industries from e-commerce, fintech, and health tech, and across different companies from early stage startup to scale-ups and more established organization. And currently, I'm a lead product management consultant and Product People. What we do is that we are premier destination for product management services, and we help companies cover leaves or accelerate their delivery or drive transformation. So today I'd like to share with you some key lessons that I learned about balancing the user experience and compliance in sign-up flows, especially in highly regulated industries, and I stress the value of involving the stakeholders early on. So sign-up flows are a delicate balance, right? And this is true in every industry, as we heard also from Markian and Shreyas. On one side, you want to have a good user experience, but on the other, you also want to learn something about your customer and in those first steps. And above all, you need to be compliant and secure at all time. So everyone is probably familiar with GDPR. But there are several more rules in highly regulated industries, like, for example, fintech or health tech. So we're facing different goals, right? On one side, the best user experience, On the other, security and compliance. And those different goals can clash sometimes and can lead to delays or customer frustration if they're not well handled. So let me share an example from a fintech project we worked on. And there we wanted to improve the transparency in the sign-up flow for a paid product. So the idea was very simple: update the copy to inform users about some immediate benefits after signing up, and then when additional perks would unlock after the payment. So seems pretty straightforward, right? Just some copy updates. So we contacted the copywriter, prepared everything for implementation, fine. Just need to check this quickly with the legal team for a green light, and we are good to go. But when we brought our plan to the legal team, things got much more complicated than expected. They raised concern about regulatory compliance, potential misunderstanding. And so this triggered multiple review rounds. And what we thought would take days at the end turned into weeks and edges, of course, because on one side we had the development team ready to implement the change. And on the other, we were not able to find a common ground with legal. So we were blocked there. So let me be frank, it was difficult to convince legal of how urgent our topic was, because of course they had a lot on their plate and didn't get why we couldn't wait for this one. So what is the lesson that we learned here? Definitely involve legal, compliance, or subject matter expert team early if you're working on highly regulated industry. Even minor changes you would never think would impact the legal part, like copy edits, for example, can have regulatory implication in these industries, and bringing these stakeholders in early will help you avoid delays. Another example I would like to share and talk about comes instead from a health tech product. So the app we were working on was targeting children. And so on top of the GDPR rules, we also had to be careful about regulations that were protecting minors. So in some markets, like in the UK, for example, users under 16 can't sign up unless the company has the right certifications. So we had to collect the age information and add this extra step to the sign-up flow that, of course, created more attrition. So the app was serving for medical purposes, but being the target children, it was centered on play. And we had a wonderful team of designers, and they translated this playfulness also in the sign-up flow. Therefore, they were reducing the potential friction. So similar to what Shreya mentioned before, we were creating some kind of values, or in this case, gamification for children already in the sign-up flow. So to sign up, I like to leave you with two key takeaways to balance user experience and compliance effectively. The first is to involve the stakeholder early, especially legal and compliance team, because even small changes can snowball into big challenges if they're not addressed on time. And the second is to consider how to design the experience to deliver also some value to the user. So sometimes in highly regulated industry, the sign-up flow must be longer because you have to collect more information. So how can you offset the attrition that is derived by this? For example, as we said in the children app, incorporate playful elements. But if you're working in other industries like fintech, you can maybe explain better the purpose why you are asking specific mandatory information, for example, emphasizing the security benefits. And this can help users see the value in providing this information, and therefore help reduce a bit the perceived burden. And so prioritize collaboration, focus on the user journey, and I believe you can create a sign-up that is both compliant and frictionless. And thank you very much, and I'm handing over to Saba.
Thanks, Betty. That was really relatable. Some of the thoughts that you mentioned with the conversations that we need to have with legal, get legal involved as soon as possible. Yeah, totally hear you and feel the pain of building products in this space. So hey everyone, this is Sabah here. I am a senior product manager with Yelp. In one sentence, what Yelp does, we connect small businesses with customers so that they can decide where they want to eat or whom do they want to hire for their services pros. So that's the mission that we are going after. And the product that I lead here is for product activation, which is very top funnel. And right, so I own the space of onboarding, permissions, and new user experience within this activation space. So I think there is a lot to speak in this in this format and in this topic, but I'm going to talk about 3 tenets that we have been following and have been very useful and result oriented for us. The first one being reduce friction. So the first tenet of reduce friction is from the user's point of view. I think very well combining from Shreyas's points and Betty's point. How do we get the user to get to the job to be done, right? So as a user, whenever we are surfacing sign up, it's during their onboarding flow, especially in a B2C world, and the motto or the motivation of this user is, hey, I've downloaded the app. I want to get to the app as soon as possible. And that's the zone of psychology that the user is in. And they don't want to see a ton of friction in their way. And they just want to get to the app to perform the job that they've come for or downloaded the app. So the first tenet that we are following is how can we reduce the friction as much as possible so that we could cruise the user through this onboarding flow and get the user sign up. The lessons that we have learned is eliminate unnecessary steps, fields, information that are to be asked in this flow so that the user can really give us the most required information that we as a product need, as well as the user can feel comfortable giving. One of the executional methods that have worked for us is progressive disclosures. We have progressively shown what are the steps that the users are taking and how far are they in the journey to start seeing the value of the app. Hence also playing or showing the psychology to the user that, hey, you're almost there and you're progressing well towards the journey of the app. The other one is keep it light and keep it delightful. The experiences that we have tested is that when you give a delight factor to the user is really enthused into performing the steps that you are asking them to, rather than making it a simple board form, which is another set of executional way that I have seen across apps where you have tons of fields and it's a plain board form where users are not really interested in actually performing the sign up flow and dropping off and performing and causing quite a bit of churn there. So that's my tenet number 1, which is reducing friction. The second part in this reducing friction is also how can we get users sign up through the technology enablements that we have got through these years. For example, how can we help users single sign on? Very similar to how Shreyas mentioned, if you have cross apps or cross features, you could use one sign on and have that information being passed on to, and that sign up information being passed on to different apps. Otherwise, in a B2C world where we are looking to get quickly we're getting this user to quickly sign up, we're looking at how can we get them sign up more frictionlessly through different sign-on options like Google sign on, Apple Maps, Apple sign on, etc. And interestingly, a data point here is that 70% of sign-ons get really fast with Google sign-ons, rather than making it more native app-driven sign-ons. So how can we actually prompt users to frictionlessly sign up with these single sign-on applications? So that's the second number in this first tenet of reducing friction. So the second tenet is optimize for motivation. Why are we asking the users to sign on? If you are giving a solid proposition to the users as to why are we expecting them to sign on, there is a much more inclination for the users to sign on. And what we have also noticed is that through these signups, we can potentially unlock different features that are available on your product so that the users know, okay, hey, I'm not just signing up as a process, but I'm signing up so that I can do XYZ actions on the app. So tying up the value of different features that you can unlock for the users through the sign up and the sign on flow really helps you get in more easier signups from the users. And the downstream effect that we have been using this is from the product side, it's all about personalization that we have been really focused on. How much can we use the information that user has given us to personalize their journey? And this primarily starts from the sign up process itself. The third tenet is I cannot stress enough how much do we want to A/B test on any of these changes that we do. Yes, we are testing out multiple features. We're testing out, do we want to have this field? Do we want to have the birth field? Do we want to have the zip code field? So there are multiple number of steps that we are actually introducing during this sign up. Our hypothesis has to be really validated through the A/B tests. I have seen enough number of product teams over the course of my tenure not emphasizing enough on A/B tests and actually looking at the long-term effects of the results of the experiments that are being run, but especially in the space of signups and onboarding. And I have seen how our hypothesis can be non-validated if we are not looking at the experiment results, not just in short term, but also in long term. So I cannot, like I said, to conclude the talk here, I cannot stress on how much we should be experimenting and making sure that we are keeping a close eye on the metrics that we are measuring on each of these optimizations or enhancements or big swings that you are making on this flow. To conclude, first tenet, reduce friction as much as possible. Second tenet, optimize for motivation. And third tenet, continuously A/B test. And I shall pass it to Sayan.
Thanks a
Fantastic.
lot.
I think we're going to just, I'm going to stop sharing now. We're going to transfer the screen share to Sayan so he can join us with slides. So I'm going to de-share there and just let you share.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you, Sabah, for that insightful talk. So let me know if my screen is visible. I hope it is. Right. So, and I hope I'm audible as well. Yeah, okay. So hopefully all of you found the talk quite interesting. I definitely found them. So I would try to summarize some of the learnings as well as add some of the other things that I learned. But I'm going to not keep it too long. I'll try to talk about two important learnings that I had from my experience. And let's talk about the first learning, right? I think Sabah talked about motivation. I wanted to bring another angle on top of it, which is the ability. And one of the things that have guided my thinking is this framework that I saw from Dr. Fogg, who is a Stanford professor. And he put his, let's say, his very simple framework of balancing motivation and ability. So what you can see is on one side, there's user's motivation. On the other side, there is the ability for the user, right? And what he says is that the ideal point is where there is high motivation and very easy to do things, right? And that's where you should aim at. And he tried to create this curve and said that, okay, anything above the curve, which is a prompt, would actually work. And this is a kind of framework that typically can be used to design a lot of good products. So I will give an example here, but I think this is where essentially balancing the motivation and ability is very important. What it means is that if users already have high motivation, then the job becomes very easy. Or if you are able to raise the motivation of users, then also it becomes easy. But typically users, especially in consumer products, have very low motivation, right? Because there is so much competition. There are so many options available in the market. So as PMs, we need to also understand how do we increase the ability of users or make it easier for users, which is towards the right of the spectrum. So I'll talk about some examples and hopefully you can relate to what I'm saying here. So the first is this, right? I don't know how many of you can remember which screen is this, but if you have applied to job in the last few years, you will remember this is the Workday application, which at least I hate when I apply to jobs, right? And no matter how many jobs you apply to, you will always end up filling these 6-7 steps in a job application, but it works because users have high motivation, right? So they have to get to a job, and to get to a job, they have to fill this form. So with high motivation, of course, with someone like Workday, they may not be willing to, or they don't have to optimize this form, but that rarely happens, right? Maybe you can also talk about government website, sometimes very archaic tax filing websites, although there are good options available, also have the same problem. Like users' motivation is high because they have to be compliant, but unfortunately the experience is poor and it works out. But most of us don't fall into this case. So the second example that I would like to talk about is something which is very famous again, which is TikTok, right? So if you go to the TikTok website or the app, right, one of the things that you will see is that there is an immediate time to value for the users, right? So if you go to the TikTok app, for example, the video starts scrolling immediately. You almost have to take no action. The login options exist, as you can see on the different sites, but login is not mandatory. You can continue to scroll, you can continue to get all the value that you can, and you don't need to log in, right, or sign up unless you really want to. Of course, there are prompts that come in, but this just shows that how easy or how TikTok, by making the ability of users really, really simple, have been able to improve the level of conversions and the level of engagement on the platform, right? And this is one of the really, I would say, good examples that exist in the market of how you can, even with low or very less motivation, improve the ability of your products and therefore increase the engagement. The last one is an experiment that we did at FreeNow, which I'm a part of. Now at FreeNow, we used to take the payment information as a part of the sign-up flow. But we realized that during the sign-up flow, payments don't make sense to users because they are still not sure whether they would like to book with us. And that's why we introduced a variant where payment information was only asked when the user wanted to book a ride, right? And this example was hugely successful with a 10% plus improvement in our conversions. And something that I also wanted to highlight. So your sign up needs to be contextual as well. Some of the principles that you can design to sign up your funnels are this, right? And this is again encapsulating a lot of what the other panelists are also saying, which is make the simple steps really simple, right? Start by asking very simple questions, highlight how each step will add benefit to the users, right? The less the words, the better it is. Ensure that the user goals are met. The users are not coming for login and sign up. They're coming to a jobs to be done, Shreyas, which he was rightly mentioning. So ensure that you care about that and not the sign up funnel. Personalize the questions and ensure that you avoid Conway's law, which is like don't try to redirect users from an app to a mobile website to a very different looking page. A lot of this happens typically because organizations have different onboarding steps, right? And all of this can be used to make this onboarding and the sign-up process simple. I'll quickly move on to the second learning. So the second learning is that although sign-up and login success matters, it should always be linked to the company's North Star metric. And I will have a simple case study to explain it. So I was working at Snapdeal, which was an e-commerce marketplace, and we offered a guest checkout option to 30% of the users. And we saw that these users converted a lot higher than the registered user, right? But the problem was that we had a far higher amount of cancellations from the guest users. And so the strategy for us was to transition these buying users to registered model, right? But all of us had concerns on the conversions of these users who were guest users and who would not have an option. To put it into perspective, this is how the, let's say, funnel earlier looked at an example. And this is how we move to, right? Which is a single step, which is login and sign up before they want to make a buying decision. And we were all circumspect that, okay, what will happen and will our conversions drop and so on. And in fact, the conversions did drop. So when we went to mandatory login, the booking conversions really dropped by 10% due to additional friction that we introduced for all the guest users. But what we found out is that the net cancellations actually dropped, right? And also the final deliveries actually increased. Like the people who come to the product page to view product to the delivered orders, they increased significantly by 5%. So overall, it was a win for the company. But if you just look at the booking website, of course, we were not doing so well. So what are the learnings? The learnings is that one is, of course, the sign up needs to be simple and intuitive. But ultimately, this is a part of the entire user's journey, right? So a success of a login or sign up, I think this is what Macken was also trying to say, that if you allow users who are not trustworthy users, they will create more friction and frauds on the platform. So ultimately, the login and sign up needs to be tied to your platform metrics. And for example, it could be rides, orders, engagement, whatever it is. And you have to consider that it's not the success of the sign up process, but it's the success of the sign up process in a way that it helps the overall platform to succeed. Right. So these are the two learnings I would like to share. And yeah, I think I'll keep it and hand it over to Adam again. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Wow, those were some amazing talks. I have so many questions, so thank you all so much. I'd love to start just where Cyan left off, which was I thought that was really interesting about guest checkouts, and I'd love with everyone apart from Cyan to just take a little bit of a litmus on what we think about this idea of guest checkouts. Shreyas, you mentioned value before sign up, right? And then there's the guest checkouts, this kind of awkward thing where it offers you that promise of value without sign up, which is always very appealing for me when I'm trying to buy something and I don't want to, create a new password for something I want to use once a month. What do you think about that? How do you negotiate that and think about what to do there?
I think one of the things we PMs often neglect is when we're just looking at numbers or the quantum of data, you often do not look at the quality of the lead that you're getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just taking the example of like guest checkouts and stuff like that, it often so happens that you've got a lot of like frivolous users who are just basically comparing stuff across different offerings, right? And I'm sure Cyan can speak more to this in terms of like e-commerce and ride sharing. There is a large quanta of users who are like, oh, let me check on Free Now and Uber and something else, and like same for Snapdeal and Amazon and whatnot, right? So I think it is absolutely okay, and you as a product team should be absolutely fine with preferring quality over quantity. The things which are important is how well are you able to segment that user, even when they have not really, say, signed up with you, right? Are there device cookies that you can look at? Are there browser sessions you could look at? Are there like, say, other, I don't know, Facebook pixel data or anything basically which can like tell you a little more about this user and a repeat activity? I think always look at that, fragment or like just segment your users accordingly, and then see, are we really using a quality user because we're not providing the true value? That's kind of how I'd go about it.
Does anybody else have a strong view on guest checkouts or enabling the user to access the service without a technical sign up happening?
I can just give my point of view, right? Like, so I think what you have to consider is the risk of a guest checkout, right? So in the e-commerce case that I mentioned, right? So I think for a, let's say, marketplace, I think trust is very important, right? And trust is at both sides, right? It's not just the buyer, but it's also the seller. Sellers lose trust when there are a lot of fraudulent buyers who come and cancel the goods, right? So I think from this kind of setting where the risk of you making the marketplace disbalanced by introducing users who are not trustworthy enough, guest checkouts for us as a learning didn't turn out to be the most beneficial one. And that's why we moved to the mandatory login. But in certain cases where, let's say, guest checkout has, or let's say, I would not say guest checkout, but let's say non-sign up flow has limited downsides. So the TikTok example that I was showing you, right, where you can fast track the time to value, right? Because ultimately users are not coming to sign up and log in. They're coming to for jobs to be done. They're coming to watch a video. They're coming to, I don't know, maybe understand something, right? Like read a blog or something like that. You shouldn't force your users to sign up and log in. But what you can do is like you can prompt them at the right moments why a login or sign up would benefit them. Like, for example, you could personalize their what they are wanting to see. For example, if it's a YouTube or a TikTok. In Netflix case, for example, login and sign up helps because they're able to personalize all the recommendations, right? But I think where the risk is not very high in terms of the downside that a user can bring or what they will have, I think definitely not having a sign up flow or a guest flow could be a lot more beneficial.
Is there, moving on from guest purchases then, are there ways that you do something in the opposite direction? So things that you might add into a sign up flow besides forcing a sign up that would make a user more likely to be more lucrative down the line, more likely to return, more likely to buy the goods once they are logged in, more likely to behave in the way that you want them to. That must be something that comes up and that kind of has trade-offs against the friction question. Could anyone talk about a way that they've thought about that before? Shreyas, you've put up your hand.
Not my product, but definitely something which comes to mind. I think booking.com does this really well. so they have their genius levels, which is basically their tiers of managing users. Like the more you book, the higher genius level you get, and so on. And I think that's a great example of like where you basically are luring your users into, okay, if you can always look up a flight or a hotel and like what the price is. But then if you book with us or if you sign up with us, we might give you an additional discount because all Genius members get like some additional rate or whatnot, right? So I think that's a good, I think barter to offer. Like, okay, sign up and in return you'll get this, right? So I think that's something which comes to mind. On YouTube, I mean, I can speak from my Google days. We actually have a non-sign up flow as well, which is like, okay, you could continue watching videos without signing up, and there is ads that you'll see. So for sure, and that again is a barter because, well, the ads you see is kind of like again obscuring your whole flow, but at the same time you're watching it free without really giving much to us in terms of sign up and your data, right?
And the booking.com is an interesting example because I've heard people not in software say to me before, whenever you buy flights, you should go into private browser because they when they see you coming back, they put their prices up, and when they know more about you, they'll charge you even more. Saba, you've got your hand up on that one.
Yeah, totally. I also think it's a lot dependent on the business model, right? For example, on Yelp, talking about my product, our business model is completely ads based. So we actually make our sign up not mandatory, or we give the users a clear way to skip the sign up, but gate them. We gate them when we are required for them to make any specific actions or give them specific features. For example, if we want them to see additional reviews or if we want them to see additional pricing from businesses, then we gate them to have them sign up. And the logic, or I would say the psychology behind this is that, hey, we want the users to come onto our app, start using the app, see the value of the app, and then eventually sign up if they are willing and they see the value of the app and willing to give us the information that they need to give for our app to work better and for our app to perform better. Right. So I think, and because our business model is such the way in a way that it's ads driven, even if we don't have the user sign up, if they are engaging with our ads, I think that's good enough from a business point of view. But from a user point of view, we want to give them the value or show them the value and then have them sign up if they are not readily signing up in their first few screens, right? So I think it's a win-win in both situations, and it's how you use that data as well, which I think Sayan and Shreyas have also mentioned.
Betty, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I think an example that comes to my mind is where the sign-up flow is actually made longer, but this still brings value. And I think it's for those products that especially B2B products, right, where the motivation is very high, but then adoption might be very low because the user starts using it and then doesn't find themselves in the product and abandon very quickly. And I think Miro is doing a very good job with that. So they ask you a few questions that then leads you towards the right direction with specific onboarding. But I've seen it also for products that we worked with, client we had. For example, the children app was also taken in consideration which kind of operation or treatment the children needed. And based on that, they were asking the question and then channeling them towards different onboardings. And same for another a client I work for is a tax and accounting software, and that's also the motivation was obviously very high. You have to declare your taxes, and asking a few questions to shape the initial page, right, based on how big is your company, for example, etc., was helping increasing the adoption and keeping the customer after the trial period.
Markayan, finally.
Yes, building on this point, I was actually going to add that adding basic onboarding surveys, they rarely hit conversion in a severe way. They rarely hit like the sign up rate that much, but they give you a lot of information that help you then either build a dynamic onboarding flow, give some recommendations, some right messaging, maybe templates, get users started. But a very interesting other approach that it allows you to do is that with that kind of onboarding survey, you start realizing not all users are created equal. And many users, just like regardless of how well you build the flow, it's just some types of users with certain criteria convert better, some convert less. And then you can feed that information back into your marketing engine and focus much more on acquiring the right type of users who just convert much better for you. So it's like you don't give them anything else, you just ask them some questions, and then based on that information, you can increase conversion by just going up funnel, changing acquisition criteria up funnel.
Yes, and I guess as well, it depends a little bit on your product in the kind of graph line that Cyan was showing, which is that if you are a light, low engagement product, then you've got to kind of respect the user's privacy and respect that they don't want to answer many questions, they just get to it much more than if you're starting on a kind of B2B engagement where the suggestion is that there's going to be a kind of deeper collaboration there. I'd love to ask everybody about common mistakes. I wonder if you were employed as a consultant and you were just hired by a business and they said, you know, we've got this problem and the problem is our sign up flow isn't working and we can't work out what it is, why it's not performing where we want it to. What's immediately springing to your mind in terms of the areas that you think they're likely to get wrong, the areas that you think would be fruitful for people to kind of look at and to investigate and to make sure that you're focused on? What is it that is the most common reservoirs of mistakes, I guess, that product management teams make when it comes to sign up flows? Can I tempt anyone to come in on that?
I can start real quick. The typical misconception that I painfully realize is that no friction doesn't mean it's the best flow. So adding some friction to either filter out users or guide them towards better onboarding that actually might help you out. So like just ruthlessly going after each step in the onboarding flow and killing all of them doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. There's a good balance there.
Fantastic. Cyan, your hand went up next.
Yeah, I would have a slightly different take. So I have found out in many cases, I think sometimes channels also create problems, right? And a lot of sign-up flows, some of the low-hanging fruits in a sign-up funnel are typically the experiences that we build for, let's say, mobile users on a phone, right? Like normally when people think about sign-up funnels, they build a lot for website and I'm talking common things like they build something for the app, but a lot of people don't test, let's say, a web experiences on a mobile phone. And in some of the emerging markets, some of the mistakes that we have made is that some of these mobile web experiences have been really poor because let's say there's no keyword help, things don't work, like there's no reading of SMS automatically, right? Like, so if you also look at the channels very closely and look at the data, sometimes you also find opportunities to improve things. And of course, a lot of this comes from data and looking at the funnels.
I wouldn't be doing my job, of course, if I didn't mention that if you are thinking about your mobile experience in emerging markets and you wanted to test it, then we are a testing partner, and you can get in touch. We help businesses check exactly that. In fact, we've checked businesses who've not realized their product is blocked altogether in specific countries where they're facing censorship or other issues. Saba, your hand went up next, I think.
Yeah, I was going to build on that. So I think it's really important that we look at the channel and the platform that, and it does not, and I've seen that across product teams, we try to keep and maintain parity between platforms in terms of experiences. Per se, over the course of my experience, it does not have to be. For example, a very recent example that we are noticing is that we build passkeys, which is an enablement of helping users sign up and store their password on the phone. And it's very much valuable on a mobile app application versus not so valuable on an M site or like a website, right? Or a desktop web app. So I think it's really important that we look at channels and perform and build channel specific experiences and what's the value out of the experience that we're building each of these channels. And the second one is drop off and churn. I think that's the other thing that I have noticed over different product teams. We do not optimize for churn and we do not optimize for drop offs, whereas we are trying to just increase the top funnel instead of getting back to users as to where are they churning, where are they dropping off. I think that's the key point we need to really understand for such instances.
And Shreyas?
I think just an additional point to what others have already said. I see this mistake being made by many companies trying to build your own identity and access management solution, right? Maybe there's a perfectly legit reason to do that eventually, but when you're like starting off a product, you don't need to. Like you don't need to have your own email ID, password, and so on and so forth, right? Use Google SSO, use Okta, use anything which is like already existing. They are great out of the box solutions to like get you started, and they're already covering you on like things like churn and things like, say, are the edge cases covered and whatnot, right?
Do you think there's a difference there between products you use daily and products you use monthly? I personally, I'm horrible with managing my passwords. I try to be secure, but for me, it's sort of whenever you reset your password, it is a sort of gently, it's like it's gently chiding you. You're doing the wrong thing, but that's not the back door for me. That's my main entrance to most of the software programs I use. I mainly reset my password every time I log in, and I wonder what the kind of whether there's a difference in emphasis there. You'd adapt your approach between, depending on how often a user's likely to use a software.
Yeah, very good point, Adam. I think, and adding up to what Shreyas was mentioning as well, I think as a product, you need to understand, are you a very high frequency product, or are you a product which is kind of used once in a year, right? Like, for example, tax filing is one major example. You don't file taxes multiple times a year. So what you need to ensure is that you don't, like, if you are building a tax filing software and you have a login and password, most probably the user doesn't remember it, or they have the same password across multiple applications that they use, right? Either of them. But I assume it's going to be a lot of password reset kind of entrances into the application. So that's why like social logins help a lot. Also, what helps is like if you have some kind of a OTP based authentication, like using your email or your mobile number, right? Versus like having a password flow in this case. And the other thing is, how do we ensure that basically, again, it's a supplemental point, but it's also very important. I've also seen many applications, they have very, very strict rules around how much time do they maintain the login session cookies for, right? So for example, many companies, they try to be very paranoid, very compliant, and they try to sometimes do things which are more compliant, but end up harming the user experience, right? So I think probably Betty spoke about it, but yeah, I think if you take care of what kind of application you are and ensure that your login kind of supports that journey and not try to just copy an Amazon or a Google or a Facebook, that helps. And the second is like, how do you ensure that you build for better user experience? Of course, keeping the compliance part as a check for sure. These are the two things that help.
Sabah, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. See, I do believe a lot of these features are also going to turn out to be table stakes versus it going to be more like a company goal or a business goal, right? So, for example, like the passkeys that I mentioned is going to be solving another problem that you had, Adam, and one-time password or magic links. I think all of these are going to be more table stakes features to make the app or the product more usable than just focused on metrics and goals.
The final thing I'd like to get into is to do with testing. Sabah, you talked a little bit about A/B testing in your talk, and I wonder how you know you're doing enough testing, or how you know that you're doing, or when you might do too much testing. Is it that you should just be, on a constant cycle of iteration? As soon as you achieve statistical significance, you should be putting another version in front of people. How would you think about, okay, how much testing should I do? How do I know that I've gone through a formal process where I'm brought in line with benchmarks with other businesses? Is there a way that you could help a manager understand what the right amount of effort and investment is for this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a classic product question, right? How much do you want to invest in a specific level? In my case, I think the principle that I follow is trying to really measure out or gauge how much investment do we need to put in for what value we are getting. and what stage of the S curve are we in. If we feel we have invested, and if we believe and we have seen we've invested enough and we are getting to the max of maturing in the curve and not seeing any more further returns on the investment, then I think that's a call that we need to take as product managers. We've invested X, we've run X number of experiments, we've seen so much lift, or we've seen so much decrement. Now we think we're at the saturation point in the S curve and we need to move next, right? So I think that's a judgment call, totally a judgment call that we need to make based on the experiments that we've run, the goal that we've set, and how much or how close are we to the goal that we have set that we've achieved. So and I think, like you said, like A/B testing is one way that we totally rely on to see what are the measurements that we are continuously getting and how much close are we to that curve.
Betty.
Yeah, I would like to add, maybe as a product manager, I'm not particularly in love with A/B testing, a bit controversial, but sometimes I think they're just, well, first of all, they make sense only if you can have statistical significance, right? Otherwise, don't call it A/B testing. It is testing, is another type of testing, but it's not A/B testing. So I think they can be correctly implemented in a short time, only very big companies. And secondly, most of the cases, right, you have to single out one variant to have a proper A/B test. And that would necessarily only bring you to incremental improvement. But if you want to bring up something really innovative, something really different, then you should choose another route. This might be another type of test rather than A/B testing. So I would say not rely too much only on A/B testing. They're a very good tool, but in precise use cases.
What kind of tests do you prefer, Betty? If you were employed and asked to take over the testing of a product sign-up flow, what other kind of techniques and things would you think about using?
Well, there are more tests that say, compared to A/B testing, where you have very scientific and statistical method behind, there are more tests that I would say are 50% science and 50% art. So it might be a feature flag where you select a specific amount of users and you check the performance. They might not have statistical significance, but they might give you a good indication of how something is working. That is something that we typically use, and especially they work well with smaller companies.
Yes, the other thing is to try and get into a kind of private browser and sign back up yourself. Although the new email you use might even be flagged by your security software that it's not quite secure. Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you, everybody who came, and thank you most of all to all of our panelists. It was really, really interesting to hear your talks and to hear your answers to the questions. We hope we will be back in the new year with more. But until then, we will see you around, and I hope that everybody has a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And see you very soon. Goodbye, guys.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.